Aloha and welcome to Is This For Real? I'm Gregory Dunn, your host, President and CEO of Hawaii's Better Business Bureau. You know, through Hawaii's Partnership for Fraud, we've examined many different topics over the course of the last 2 years. And today we're going to examine something a little bit different. Other than just scams in the marketplace, we're going to talk about dispute resolution and how consumers and businesses can both take advantage of various forms of alternative dispute resolution. Today we're very fortunate to have with us an expert in that arena, Mr. Gerry Clay. Gerry is a founding partner of the local law firm Clay Chapman, and he's also a leading expert in the area of mediation and alternative dispute resolution. So Gerry, thank you so much for joining us today.
It is my pleasure.
So, you know, we talk a little bit about your expertise, and we know that you wrote a book, or co-authored a book, on the subject of mediation many years ago. You're one of the leading experts in the field of ADR. What exactly is alternative dispute resolution at its core?
Alternative dispute resolution is something other than lawsuits.
Okay.
There are two main titles to the alternatives. One is arbitration, the other one is mediation.
So we have arbitration and we have mediation.
Right.
Two different things.
Very different.
Okay, so what exactly is arbitration at its core?
Arbitration is a private trial. It is almost exactly like a lawsuit, except the two parties jointly choose who their private judge will be. But basically, it is same path, going down the same path as if you were in court. Mediation, on the other hand, is 180 degrees different. Mediation doesn't look at the little dispute that the parties have. Mediation, particularly among business people, is about what happened to their relationship. We have a problem, but we have a bigger problem. What happened? How did we get to the point where we're thinking about actually suing one another? Arbitration and litigation has as its basic premise that somebody is right and somebody is wrong, and the person who's right wins, and the person who is less right loses. But it's a crazy system because it doesn't talk about how much right, how much wrong.
So this is a lawyer saying this. You're trained as an attorney, you're a partner in a law firm, and you're saying that an adversarial system of justice where you have a party that's either right or wrong is crazy.
It's bad, absolutely. You couldn't design anything worse than trying to put two business people in opposition to one another. And as you indicated, the name of our system is called the adversary system of justice. It came from England. And if you look up the definition of adversary, the first meaning will come up as enemy.
And so we're talking about using a system where people are put as enemies in trying to decide a dispute when most business and contracts and business relationships are built on a relationship. They're built on trust between two parties, whether that's a business and a consumer or a business and a business.
Absolutely. As I said, you couldn't design anything worse than trying to force people into a system that says, I'm right, you're wrong. And the craziness is that in civil litigation, you only have to be 51% right. It's called a preponderance of the evidence to win the whole suit. And I'll tell you, it doesn't work. And when I say that, what I'm saying is you have this complicated system that takes so much energy, legal time, and in the end, we have statistics in Hawaii. 97+% of cases never have a final decision.
That's 97+% cases filed,
right,
or don't have a decision.
Don't have a final
so
decision.
They've clogged into the court system. They have, you know, a defendant and a plaintiff, people that are saying they have a dispute that they need a court to resolve, and over 97% don't get to the point where they're really resolved in the courts.
Funny but true. I mean, if you could really focus on it, it sounds ridiculous. But yes, this is a system, this vaunted system of finding right and wrong that, at least for civil cases, all the cases that involve business people, doesn't end up with a winner or a loser. It ends up, well, one party dies, one party goes bankrupt, but for the most part, one party just decides through their attorney with the other side to settle. Now, that may take months, might take years, but in the end, they'll settle.
And they've normally spent a lot of time and money and effort along the way, getting to the point where they realize that it's time, they need to settle, or they're forced to settle, maybe not even to anyone's best interest.
I'll tell you what I have learned after 49 years of practice. There's something that becomes more important than winning, and that is not losing. I mean, the loss of face is such an important thing. If you want to posit logic and emotion, my experience tells me every time emotion will win out.
So how does mediation help to resolve this challenge? Where does mediation come into play as a resolving factor for the community?
First of all, let's talk about the difference philosophically of litigation, the adversary system, arbitration, and its counterpart 180 degrees away called mediation.
Okay.
Arbitration, litigation is based on the fact that somebody is right and somebody is wrong. Mediation is something that looks at the whole relationship. In other words, the mediator's job is to find out what went wrong. But more than that, the mediator's job is to determine how I can help both parties maximize what could be in their best interest. So instead of just looking at, did he really breach the contract? Let's look at, why did we have this reaction at this point? We've been doing business for a year, a decade, and now all of a sudden, what happened to the relationship? That's what the mediator is supposed to look at.
So when the mediator picks up the case, they come in, they look at these various aspects of it. The mediator's role is to try and learn about it and help find common ground and help both parties understand ways that they may come together on an agreement. Can you give us an example of a case that you worked on or a mediation you worked on where you saw that come together really successfully?
Be happy to. I had a case where we had a shopping center developer who took a big, old, huge building and he made it into retail stores, and his anchor tenant was going to be a large mainland pizza franchise. And to bring this person in, as is usual, there was going to be 3 months of free rent while the construction was going to go forward. For various numbers of reasons, 3 months stretched to 10 months. And at the end of the 3 months, the landlord demanded his rent and the tenant paid his rent. But at the end of the 10 months, the tenant says to the landlord, I wasn't treated fairly, I want my 10 months of rent back. This went into litigation. The parties decided to go to mediation. They gave me 2 days. At the end of about a day and a half, we were still looking at how much free rent, how much other advantage the tenant could get from different things, when I started to ask, let's take a look at your tenant. Do you respect him? Do you like him? Brought a big smile to the face of the landlord. He said, yeah, he's really a very good businessman. He has gone out and retained marketing consultants, and they determined that 80% of the business would come within a half mile of the shopping center. And that most of those people would be brought in by children maybe even into their mid-20s, who would tell the parents, let's go here. And so what the media consultant said is, give away free discount coupons, give away discount coupons that would have a little charge to them. But anyway, they focused on discount coupons. And I asked the landlord, do you think discount coupons could help your shopping center? And he sat back and thought for a moment. He says, absolutely, that could help the shopping center. He said, let's stop talking about money and free rent. Let's talk about instead you purchasing a number of coupons that you could see would benefit you, and the tenant could see would benefit them, and all of a sudden we started talking about a new currency. Instead of money and free rent, the old currency, now the currency to settle the dispute would be coupons.
So let's get this straight. So you're saying that the mediation started out with the two parties discussing the lease rent issue.
Right.
And the issue that one party said, I've got a dispute, I want more of my money back, or I don't want to have to pay rent for that period when I thought. But through mediation, you were able to find something that mattered to both parties that changed the conversation from just the discussion about the lease rent, but over to a way that both could benefit through the process of mediation and achieve the goals that they had in mind for each other.
You're absolutely right. And in this particular case, remember, the parties had to relate with one another for the next 10 years.
Yeah, they were already in the lease.
Yeah.
So it was something that they were stuck with each other. So,
Right.
So if they had gone with the adversarial system where they continued to duke it out until one was left bloody and laying in the street versus one winner, one loser, they would still have to live with each other for 10 more years.
And they would hold that grudge for every bit of that 10 years. And so the adversary system would have given them a terrible result. Wow. A mediation focused on interests of both parties brought about a reestablishment of a good relationship.
So as we're looking at within the community, I mean, a lot of the folks that watch the program are small business owners and even consumers that may have contracts or agreements in place out there. If in a contract it specifies mediation as a resolution, what are some of the things that the parties to that contract should keep in mind should a dispute arise? How do they go about enacting that clause?
If they're still talking to one another, they should say, let's try mediation first before we even think about going to see a lawyer. Or if they already have lawyers, tell the lawyer, each side should tell their lawyer, I want to try mediation before you go file a lawsuit or send out that terrible demand letter that if you don't do this, I will do this plus to you. And then, of course, I have to remember, you'll do this plus to me. We take a different perspective. Let's look at maximizing the best interests for both parties. And lawyers understand this, and lawyers have bought into this. It's just very slowly starting.
You know, it's one of the things that is good about the Better Business Bureau, and that with our accredited businesses that are members of the BBB and have agreed to subscribe to our standards, sign a pledge that say if there's a dispute with a consumer or with a fellow business where they've had a marketplace transaction, prior to resorting to litigation, they commit to going into mediation if they follow the BBB's dispute resolution program, because it does save money and it maintains relationships. It's really good for the community.
Yeah, and you gave two items. You said save money and continue the relationship, and I'll say continuing the relationship is so much more important than just focusing on the little dispute and the transference of currency between those two parties.
So, and when we're thinking about mediation and entering into it, you know, the question becomes, you know, geez, I've always learned that, you know, if I get a lawyer and I can fight for what's mine and I'll get what's coming to me, going into mediation, don't you have to be prepared to give up and not win?
Well, you see, one of the problems we have in relationships and dealing with one another is we focus on the small instead of looking at the macro level of the relationship. And so to the extent that we're thinking about giving up something with regard to this little dispute that we have, and it may not be little in terms of dollars, could be hundreds of thousands of dollars. But is there something bigger? And the answer, I can tell you from my experience, is there's always something bigger. And so you don't have to think about, before I go in, that I'm going to give something up. Rather, put your disputes in the hands of an experienced, competent business mediator who will then begin to help both parties see what they can't see because they're in the dispute. I mean, we have blinders on when we become emotional. And we have to kind of spread those binders, and the job to do that is the job of the mediator.
So you said, if we're still talking, we don't have attorneys involved, obviously, and it's something you want to proceed in. What's the first step that someone should think about in pursuing mediation? How does one go about engaging a mediator?
Well, if it's a dispute that doesn't have large dollars, we have a nonprofit organization on Oahu called the Mediation Center of the Pacific, where they have trained people who feel they have the ability to help others to be mediators. Now, you don't have the choice of who it's going to be, but you do have somebody with a competence level that can come in and assist the two disputing parties to see what's in their best interests. To the extent that this is a dispute that involves enough money, there's an organization in town that finds professional mediators.
Mm-hmm.
And that organization has a list of mediators in town, including their biographies, their areas of expertise, and other information. If the dispute is large enough, you will already have an attorney, and you could ask your attorney, who should I get for this dispute? And they'll most likely go to this organization called Dispute Prevention and Resolution. We call it DPR. And they have a website, and on their website they list all their mediators and give you biographies. And that helps you choose somebody with the competence and the techniques and experience to help solve your problem.
So we get to the point where we've identified someone or a list of people that we propose. The one side says, I'd like these people as mediators. The other side may say, I know this person, or I don't like that person, or this person may have a conflict. What's the next step in the process with the mediation? You get together, you talk about it, you do the discovery, the discussion. At what point do we get to inking the deal? How does that work with mediation? Is it just a handshake and you go on your merry way, or what are the various options?
The problem you identify is one of how do we make sure whatever we agree to will be carried out. And whether you go to the Nonprofit Mediation Center of the Pacific or the Business Dispute Prevention and Resolution, at the end of the game, when you have an agreement, it will be written down, and that will be a contract to be enforced. However, there's a way to make it absolute, and that is by appointing your mediator as an arbitrator and having him call this a stipulated arbitration award. That can then be taken to court and through a small process be made into a final judgment. And so then you've got the power of the court to make sure whatever you agreed upon will be enforced.
So in other words, you have the in some ways the best of both worlds, where you have the friendly collegial method of resolving the issue, but codifying it through the court system so there's a record and then an enforcement mechanism.
I totally agree with that. Okay. Yes.
So in terms of getting to the yes, it sounds important to have a mediator that has subject matter expertise in the issue that you're looking to mediate.
It certainly helps because then you don't have to educate the mediator in the industry. Otherwise, there's a longer process of bringing a competent mediator to understand how the industry works and why something makes more sense or is in the better interest of one party or the other. So yes, I always suggest get somebody with subject matter expertise to be the mediator. But believe me, it is more important that the mediator have the skill. We'll call it an artistic ability to be able to have parties see what's in their own best interest. And while subject matter is important, it is by far less important than the idea of being able to help parties see what is in their best interest.
So we get to the point where you've gone through all of these, you're in a mediation, things are plugging away. What if you can't get to yes? I mean, you've opted into mediation. What do you do then if it doesn't work? I mean, it's like...
Well, you go back to where you were before you started the mediation. You're either in arbitration or in litigation. And there's a law that actually says you cannot use an offer somebody made in mediation as something to be against them when you go back.
So in other words, then, for a consumer or for a business, it's not like you're exposing anything in mediation that can harm you or damage you. You're looking for a resolution.
Basically, that's correct.
That information can't be used against you. It's almost like confidential settlement negotiations.
That is correct. Now, as a lawyer, I can poke holes in your statement because it's a very broad answer, but yes, basically that is correct.
So in terms of working with counsel during a mediation, is something that if it's for larger dollar amounts, is something you would want to consider having, or generally speaking?
I would go beyond consider. Absolutely. Every dispute should have the assistance of a lawyer. They understand the right and wrong side, and they can bring that into play as you discuss the broader relationship. And I recommend, by the way, always have a lawyer. Unless the dispute doesn't have enough dollars involved, you should always get legal assistance.
Because particularly in Hawaii, our legal landscape is incredibly complex. From a BBB standpoint, one of the things that we hear our business owners complain about the most is the complexity of licensing and laws that they must comply with, and personal privacy and information, all of these different things that can really pose a pitfall if you are unaware.
Absolutely. And the legal system is something that has been created and can really only be understood by lawyers. I mean, 3 years of law school and then, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 years of experience. You as a consumer in a dispute, you as one of the parties, one of the disputants, really can't understand the complexity you're talking about, and you need legal assistance. But do it in the format of a mediation where we're going to talk about the relationship rather than the format of arbitration or litigation where you're only going to talk about how to solve this dispute that we have in front of us right now.
Well, as we're looking at wrapping up this segment about mediation, what are a couple of parting thoughts you want to leave people with as they're sitting back and thinking about this and going, oh, well, the last thing I want to do is think about mediation as a topic. Why should people think about it? Why is it important?
Well, you should go to somebody who has expertise, particularly in business disputes, and then call the BBB and talk to them. And they will give you a much broader perspective, what I'm saying into your perspective. And from there you can decide, do I want to get a volunteer mediator or do I want to get a professional mediator?
And what's the difference between a volunteer and a professional mediator?
Professional mediator does this as their business. This is their life skill. A volunteer has a history of being in the community and doing business, but has not had the experience, perhaps, of a professional mediator who goes out and puts their card out into the marketplace and says, I can help you as a professional. There really should be no difference, but it's like anything. I mean, you can go to a dentist, choose something else for me.
Any profession.
Any profession. And you can choose the professional, or you can choose people who maybe tell you, I think I understand this, or I know what, but I've had training and technique, so I can be of help. And yes, that's why the Mediation Center of the Pacific is such a gem for us to have in Hawaii, to be able to get smaller cases that really would benefit from mediation into that arena, rather than talk about, I'm going to go down to court.
Well, it certainly is a wonderful opportunity for people to be able to understand that it's not just about going down to small claims court and filing a case against someone right away for a small case. I know that within the BBB system, even for non-accredited businesses, if consumers have a complaint or an issue in which they're looking for a specific resolution, the BBB provides mediation services, and we work very closely with the Mediation Center of the Pacific and others to provide those services with trained mediators. Mm-hmm. And it's something that does help keep cases out of the court system and helps to expedite resolution. Because one of the things when people get into the system, they'll find that it can take a long time and a lot of expense.
And worse than the expense or the time is the angst. You can't focus on your business when you're emotionally involved in a dispute with somebody who you formerly had a decent relationship to get into this. I mean, it's a stupid system to try to prove you're wrong. And part of the way you do that is destroy the credibility of the guy you had a relationship with before. The system says that's the way to go. But as a business matter, that's a stupid way to go. We started this interview by talking about the fact that before I pass on, I want to change one thing, and that is I want to change the mindset to thinking, I'm going to beat you, I'm going to sue you, and I'm going to win, to thinking, let's get a mediator first.
Gerry, that is the perfect way to close this segment. We really appreciate your time and your mana'o in helping us to rethink litigation as the only solution, and instead putting mediation out to people. So thank you very much for your time today. It's very much appreciated.
And thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome. And thank you for tuning in to Is This For Real? I'm Gregory Dunn, your host, President and CEO of Hawaii's Better Business Bureau. Look forward to seeing you again soon. Aloha.